but I'm coughing up blood this morning. I mean, this ain't all. I was coughing up when I woke up. God, I wish I wasn't coughing up blood right now. Cause I crawled up under that house, I woke up, every joint, I'm just hurt, I'm sore. So I really wish I could take an aspirin to reduce inflammation. But if I'm bleeding and it's coming from my lungs, I don't need to take no aspirin. So I just gotta tough it out. I am running late. It's still a victory because I'm coming in work to do the same thing all over again. Except this time, with joint pain and muscle fatigue and everything else. Oh man, my lungs hurt. My elbow hurt is like raw from my commando crawling across the sand and rocks in the house. On the right side, not the left side, though, this side. The covers kept scraping up against it. So I have to stop for gas. There's the sun. Oh. Ravenheart, when I was smoking, I wasn't coughing up blood. Are you sure quitting is good for me? I think I got enough gas to get to work. It's not enough to get to work and get back. I have to probably stop it. Maybe even have to stop in McCord's and just wait for everyone to get out. Across the Alligator Creek. That's the Alamo Creek. See, Alamo still coughing up blood. I knew that smoking, that ain't good for me. So I quit. And now I'm coughing up blood. Oh no. Maybe it's part of healing. Stop. That's an alarm going off. Because I done hit snooze 4 or 5 times. I wish I could just turn left at this red light instead of going to Vidalia to work at All-Pro and go up to my little farm and just farm it and make a living that way. I do like working for All-Pro. I just really wish I could be a farmer instead. One, I'd already be at work by now. I'd already be, it's just like right over there. When my lungs start, when there's blood in my lungs to cough up, it's like the blood is in my breath. I can taste it. I can taste the blood in my lungs. Jesus. I didn't have no bad dreams last night, though. I was reading up about, is it normal to cough up blood when you quit smoking and all that? And there was a lot of people saying, yeah, but if you cough up blood, you should see a doctor. There's people in the comments talking about that they panicked and everything. And I don't know. I'm a little concerned, but I don't really think I gotta go to the doctor. I think it'll take care of itself. A lot of times it does. A lot of times the body just heals itself. Sometimes it don't, though. Hey, good morning. I don't know if any of y'all watched me yesterday, but I was talking about it at work. I crawled up under that house pulling out insulation. And I'm 38 and I wake up, all my joints are hurting. I got a respirator, so that's good. I'll have to breathe in any of that mess. This is I don't know if this is the third day of me coughing up blood. I really, really, really got to go on a fast and let my body heal my lungs. See, I'll show you I ain't bullshit. I should just see if I would have. I was hurting and I was stiff when I woke up, and if I took an aspirin, the swelling would go down, my joints would stop hurting, it'd be easier to get up. But I just can't risk taking an aspirin because it's a blood thinner. It just is what it is. It just took a little extra this morning for my mind to tell my body, get up and go to work. I was watching this guy on live last night. He's kind of an interesting fella because while he's I don't know if he's for real or if it's a joke, but he constantly uses racial slurs while talking about racism being bad and advocating for race mixing. So I don't know, is he racist? Is he not racist? And he's an old guy. And there's a whole bunch of crows landing in the road right in front of me in a line with None of them were in the. Let me. They must be something. My audio is still mute. I didn't know my audio was mute. I knew the audio. I thought when I saw that comment where somebody said my audio was mute, I thought that when I took the phone call, it muted the audio temporarily, and then when it went back to the live screen, that it unmuted itself. I didn't know this whole time I've been talking on mute. Oh, so I don't remember exactly. There's some cows over here. I can pick up the phone and film the cows because, police don't really like you having your hands on your phone while you're driving. But what I was saying is, I'm 38, I'm almost 40. I crawled around under that house pulling on the insulation. All my joints hurt. I can't take an aspirin because I'm coughing up blood. I don't need to take a blood thinner while I'm coughing up blood. I wake up, every single joint hurts to move, lungs hurting, coughing up blood. And it's kind of hard to work up the will to just get up and go because I'm just hurting. I'm just like, I need a little bit more rest. It's not going to be no better to get 10 more minutes or 20 more minutes of rest. Because your mind, it's hard to tell your mind that. It's hard to tell your mind when you're coughing up blood and all your joints hurt, and you got to go do the same thing you did. You know you're going to be the one doing the lion's share of it, crawling around and all, because I'm not claustrophobic. And then I got to do it with the joint pain and with the coughing up blood, and I still get up and go to work. So I know I shouldn't be late, but I know how to wire houses for a living, you know? I'm working with the commute and everything. I'm working for less than $10 an hour. All pro needs to just, please don't fuss at me when I get to work late. Please don't. Because who else coughs up blood and still comes to work? So just, plus, I was told conflicting. I know Hunter told me he'd get there early, but he almost never does. And B was like 8. And I didn't plan to come for 8. I planned to come for 7:30. But I was hurting too. Like, at first I couldn't move. I had to move my joints. It hurt to move them. I had to get stretched out. I had to get, it just hurts. My lungs just hurt. They say that when you smoke, if you think about it, you're training yourself to suppress coughing so you can smoke. So they say that once you quit smoking, you're just going to cough a bunch because you're getting more sensitive to being triggered to cough. And then all that coughing can cause your lungs to bleed. And that's why I'm coughing up blood. But I don't know how your lungs clot or scab up or how all that works, but I might cough up blood and then get it all coughed up, and then I don't feel no blood in my lungs, and then maybe I cough again, maybe it opens the wound back up, I start tasting blood in my breath, I start feeling like I got bronchitis or something, like I got fluid in my lungs, then I go right back to coughing up blood, and then I feel a little bit nauseated, almost so little lightheaded not to notice, but a little bit. And then, then I get up and I go to work. And then that happens the next day, and I get up and I go to work. Really, my body doesn't even need to be working, but there's no option for that. That we don't live during those times. We live during the times where we're machines, we're on a schedule, we gotta go no matter what. We can't just ride into the Lord and be like, I'm coughing up blood today. I need a few weeks to recover, or else it's gonna take a month to heal because my body will never get a rest. Can't say that. The bills are due. The bills need to be paid. Can't afford to take off of work. Damn sure can't take off of work and have a doctor bill. Damn sure can't afford that. So, the doctor's going to want $100 just for you walking in the office. Can't have money taken out my check. The profit margin isn't that high. It's had to drive up all this gas going back and forth to Vidalia. I basically work to be able to afford to go to work and buy my food without asking for no handouts, no EBT, nothing like that. But I don't have money stacking up like the boss. I don't really talk too much to the boss I got out, but like everybody I've worked for, they're so unrealistic about, they'll be like, why haven't you bought this? Or buy you this? Or, just go get one of these. The fuck? We don't make the money you make now. And this generation, the boomer generation, they pay the smallest percent out of profits of any generation ever. They're really the greediest generation that there has ever been, probably. And then they act oblivious to it. They're like, they know. And now part of it is because the inflation game kind of plays a trick on their mind. Because 50 years ago, if you was making, I forget what it is, it's something really small, like $2 an hour would be equivalent to like $1,000 a week or something really crazy. So like when they hear how much they're paying us an hour, they think back when they was a kid, and they're like, "That's plenty of money." And then they make so much over. You know, with businesses though, a lot of people are unrealistic about like it's different for different businesses. Some businesses have a really low profit margin, and they take on all the risk. I mean, I do believe that, you know, like when you're an employee, you're not taking on any risk. You got to steady every week. You might not be getting paid a lot, but you know you're getting paid every week. When you own a business, you don't know if you're going to go out of business. You feel the burden of all the employees that you feel responsible for. You got to make sure that you're going to be able to pay them every week. You know, they're always trying to increase the cost of doing business with capital gains taxes and everything else. And then you're a slave to the business. You can't just quit and go work somewhere else or whatever. You're just stuck there forever, you know. So, and you have to sacrifice a lot to build a business. Most businesses fail. Most people who have successful businesses have already started a few businesses that didn't make it. You normally don't make money for a few years while you're just recovering your losses. So it's not easy to run a business. So but even still, so it's like some people are unrealistic about that. And they're like, eat the rich. I don't believe that. I don't believe in that, you know, because like a lot of people don't make the sacrifices to get to the point. And then they want those people that made all the sacrifices to just give them money for nothing, you know. But I'm not asking for money for nothing. You know, it's just like that prophecy in Jude. It's like the laborers are just crying out for their wages because we're being gaslit because it's like we got the highest productivity numbers. We got higher productivity numbers than the generation that's telling us that they work more than we did. Their parents worked more than they did. They didn't work more than we did. My generation is divided. My generation has half of them don't work. That's actually true. So half of my generation don't work, and the half of my generation that don't work, they made a bad reputation for the rest of us. So the rest of us overwork ourselves trying to prove ourselves, you know. But the ones of us that are going into work, you know, there's all the ones that don't even work, collect government assistance and all that shit. There's the ones that come into the job site and are lazy, but it's always been that way. It's always been 20% of the employees doing 50% of the work. It's always been that way throughout all time in every field and endeavor. It's always that the workload is not equal. Everybody might get paid the same at the company, but still 20% of the company is going to be doing 50% of the work. And the other 80% is going to be doing the other 50% of the work. And I'm one of those, the top 20%. And like a good company, they'll fire the ones that aren't working, and they'll replace them with ones that are working, and they'll eventually accumulate a lot of the good workers. But some companies won't do that. Some companies will just make those that work more shoulder more of the burden, and they'll just let the lazy ones just get a free ride. They'll keep drawing a check, and they'll just barely do shit. And that's not really fair for the ones that do work. And so I know a lot of people my age that work very hard, but the ones that don't are giving us a bad reputation. And then like we're working so hard to try to prove ourselves, and we've got the productivity numbers higher than the boomer generation, and we're getting paid way a smaller percentage of the profits of the companies than they were. Because really they're just more greedy than their parents were. It's like they're doing reverse property mortgages when they inherited something. You know, that generation will inherit a whole bunch of wealth and then turn around and tell their children, I ain't got $10 for you. You know, they'll tell you, you got to do it all yourself. And then instead of leaving, you know, you'll have property been passed down 5 generations, and then then when it gets to them, they're like, I'm going to do a reverse profit, just give it to the bank. And then a smaller percentage of profits than any generation ever before. And then they have the audacity to say that I'm not going to go on a rant about that. I'm just. It almost is all of them. Almost all of them. I've worked for 3 different companies where they've got multiple houses talking about they're poor and can't afford to pay a raise or anything. And they're lying. They just straight up are telling bullshit lies. And then they'll go right before it's about time. They'll pretend like the company ain't making money because they'll just buy a bunch of assets to make it money that they can borrow against. And then they'll be like, see, there's no money. Meanwhile, they got 3 or 4 bank accounts. They'll just show you like, hey, look, I ain't got no money, see? And they got money over here, money over there. They got a credit score to where they could just, hey, you loan me $1 million. So, but then a lot of businesses are struggling because the government's really squeezing them for everything they can. If you buy stocks and you look at the profit margins of these companies, some of these companies may have high profit margins, like 50%, but a lot of them have profit margins 10% and below. You'll look at a company in your portfolio, their profit margins drop to like 2%. You'll be like, why do I own this? How do you sell this? There's a lot of companies running on extremely small profit margins, percentage-wise. And people think, there's people that they own a lot of stock in their own company. So people think they got all this money, why don't they just give it away? Well, they got to sell stock to get that money. And if they start selling that much stock to get that much money, it's going to trigger a reaction where people lose confidence in the stock and start selling off. And before it comes back to the actual value of the company, they've just lost a shit ton of money with all the shares going down. And so they can't really just afford to just sell off that many shares all at once. There's a lot of people most of the people that are like, eat the rich, don't have a clue about how the economy works, how wealth creation works, how incentives work on human nature, how positive and negative incentives work. They just feel like, hey, he's got more than me. He should give me what he has. And that's a very childish way of looking at it. But of course, that's why they're on that side of the political spectrum, because they are allergic to responsibility and they do have a very childlike grasp of the world and they do not really grow up. That's why communists exist, because grown children exist. That's all it is. That's why they have the So, I'm acknowledging that, yes, we do have a problem with an increased amount of greed in that generation. But it's not really the free market that's the problem. And people think that we have free market capitalism in America. We don't. We have a central bank with fiat debt-backed currency that's controlled by international Jews, not even the American people. In what kind of way and we have wage controls and price controls. And then we have subsidies and all these other things. You're really fooling yourself if you think we have a free market economy. We have sort of a hybrid system between communism and a free market. It's not really a free market. And so then people blame capitalism. It's not capitalism that's the issue. You can make a perfect system, and you're still having people that are not perfect as parts of that system. And people can exploit any system. There's going to be evil people. No matter what form of government you have, there's going to be corruption. It's not always so sometimes people will say, well, the problem is that we have a monarchy, or the problem is that we have a democracy, or the problem is we have a republic, or the problem is the whole system is made out of people. People that lie, kill, steal. People are good and bad, But a lot of times it just comes down to the morality of the people. If you've got a moral people, it almost doesn't matter what system of government you have. And then if you've got an immoral people, it almost doesn't matter what system of government you have either. And I used to believe the best form of government is a constitutional republic. I've changed my view as I've gotten older. I think it depends. There's different governments work for different situations. So there's some benefits to democracy and there's some drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is you got to argue forever before you can just take decisive action. You've got to argue every single issue out. That's a disadvantage. A king doesn't have to do that. The government can be more efficient and just go. But obviously there's drawbacks to that system. You can have a good king, has a spoiled son, now your whole government's fucked. He's blinking and telling me the cops are ahead and he's missing a headlight. And anyway, that's legal under some local cops and stuff that try to pull you over for that. The Supreme Court, or I don't know, the courts have already ruled that that's protected under free speech. You're allowed to flash your lights and say, hey, there's cops ahead. Also, cops arrested people for disorderly for shooting a bird. I've never shot an officer, the banger, or any government official or anything. I've just never done that. I think you're lacking class to do that. But you can't. They sometimes arrest people for it because you know how sensitive a lot of them are. But for disorderly, but the courts have already ruled that's protected under free speech. That's not disorderly conduct. So you can shoot cops and birds. I don't recommend it. Why would you do that? And you can flash your lights to let people know, hey, there's cops set up with a speed trap or whatever. All it's protected under free speech. That's how the courts have ruled it. I got distracted from what I was saying. Something about different forms of government, whatever. The drawbacks. Another drawback in democracy is because everyone's got to worry about getting elected next year and they got to have money for it and they got to be popular for it. You're forced to get elected by telling people what they want to hear, which is comforting lies, not the actual painful truths. So that's a big disadvantage. A lot of people think democracy is the best because it gives the will of the people. It's sovereignty by the will of the people. But another reason it's not good is because just like anything else, governing is a skill. And 20% of the people have 50% of the skill, and 80% of the people have 50% of the skill. The Pareto principle, whatever it's called, the Petro principle is still at play. And not everybody is as skilled at governing. And so when you give everybody the vote, you trend toward mediocrity. Because, there's a lot more unintelligent people than there are geniuses. There's a lot more lazy people than hardworking people. There's a lot more politically ignorant people than informed people. So if you give one vote to the whole thing, it comes about based on a faulty premise that everyone's just equal because of some magic X factor. Even if you see a guy that's even if he's got better grades, even if he's stronger, even if he's better looking, for some reason, we just pretend he's equal to somebody that's all the opposites because there's got to be some special quality that we're not seeing that just equals everything out. We just go ahead and take it as a given that, and the truth is there's a lot of people that the country would be a lot better off if they couldn't vote. For one, I would strip all non-net taxpayers of the vote. If you are not paying taxes and you are costing the government money, you're basically like a child dependent upon the system. Why should you get to vote how to spend other people's money? And another thing, if you're not going to ever be able to defend the country or fight for the country, why should you get a vote? It makes absolutely no sense for non-net taxpayers, anybody that's a ward of the state, anybody that's living off welfare. They shouldn't be able to vote because they're just going to vote to take the money from the people that work. You don't need a whole class of people that are not willing to work voting to take the money from those who are. That's a bad system. And that's inevitably going to happen if you have democracy, especially if you give the vote. So you don't need non-net taxpayers voting to take. You don't need people that don't work. Imagine this. you can get the majority of people not even working a job. Let's say 60% of America refuse to work. They can outvote the 40% that is working, and they can say, give me all your money. That's why a republic's better than a democracy, because you can put something in the Constitution saying they can't do that to protect the rights of the minorities. But in a democracy, like a direct democracy, there is no protection to the minority. So you can have 80% of the country decide not to work and vote to take the money from the 20% that do. So there's a lot of disadvantages. And the king would never see his whole country ruined. Oh, that bullshit. That.
No, still.
Okay.